Now then, it's Burnsy, and welcome to our regular Curiosity podcast, the CuriosityCast. Every episode, we take questions asked by members of the public in Hull and try and get them the best answers from the very best brains in the city of Hull. Not all questions are about Hull. They can be about whatever you want to discover. This episode, a very special guest, and you can tell by the number of questions we've had in for her. It's the current Member of Parliament for Hull West and Haltemprice, Emma Hardy. Emma, nice to see you. Welcome to the CuriosityCast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really curious.
All right.
Really
we'll get to the questions, but I just as a sort of a loosener, do people treat you differently now that you're actually near the levers of power in Parliament, that you are the government? Are you getting more scraps on your chips at the fish shop, more mushy peas? Do people? It's a light-hearted but serious question. Do people treat you different now? You're closer to power.
Not locally. I mean, people treat you the way they always have. I think everybody's very used to seeing me out and about. I think obviously in Parliament it's different because there's a difference when you're in there as a minister than you're in there as a backbench MP. So around Parliament, I mean, just really small things like you suddenly have all these people that are there to help you. Whereas when you're in opposition, it's kind of like me in the House of Commons Library, some of my constituency staff working together. But when you're in government, there's suddenly a whole department of people. So if you ask a question like, okay, I want you to tell me more about, this particular type of pollution in this particular area, you get an answer back within an hour from someone going, right, we've looked at it and this is what it is and we can get you further details on it. And so the amount of resource available to you is really different in government than it is in opposition, and it kind of makes you realise how difficult being in opposition is. Of course, that was all I ever knew. But in terms of people, general people, no.
Okay. And does that make you a better MP? Will you be able to do more for us because you've got this resource, the resource of government behind you?
Well, it just makes things a lot easier. So like if in my brief, which is all water and flooding and all of those areas, which a lot of I was doing in opposition, but in terms of sort of staffing hours, obviously I've only got so many hours. I've only got sort of my constituency office. They've only got a few hours to look at it because we're dealing with, all of the issues from people coming in all of the time. Whereas once you've got a department there, you can do more because you can be more informed, you can find out more things, you can get answers more quickly, you can make decisions. And I think that's the thing is in opposition, if you make a decision, it can be meaningless because you can decide, we want to do this, this and this. But actually, if you're not in government, the chances of it happening are really small. So you suddenly have, I suppose, a greater influence. So all those things that I was on about before, I wanted to do in terms of flooding, flood protection and all those things. Now, you've got the opportunity to realise some of them. And some of them, there were practical reasons why, the ideas you thought were really good maybe weren't as good as you thought they were. But you've got the opportunity. And I think that's the biggest thing. In government, you have the opportunity to change things. In opposition, it's really, really hard. You can try, but it feels like, I describe in opposition, you're putting out fires. So people come with you a problem and you can try and help that one person. You can put that one fire out, but you can't change the system. In government, you can look at changing the system to prevent the fires in the first place.
There you go. Emma Hardy is our guest on the CuriosityCast. That was my question. I just thought I'd start with that. I'm sure if you asked for more scraps or mushy peas, you'd get them. Wouldn't be a problem.
Is there better biscuits? Do you get better biscuits when you...
No,
this is producer Dave, by the way, who's brought biscuits to the CuriosityCast today. He's buttering us up.
No, but they're, I'll tell you what, I was quite pleased. In the DEFRA building, because there's DEFRA in there, there's Home Office in there, there's the housing. So it's a massive, there's thousands of people work in this big building. And right at the bottom, there's a cafeteria and there's really good salad bar.
All right.
And there's almost and there's a woman who stands there and you can choose your bread and choose your sandwiches and you can get your own, everyone can, not just MPs, get your own sandwiches made. And I thought that's quite...
No offence to either Dave or myself, but it's a while since either of us visited a salad bar. Should we get to the questions? Let's get to Erin, who's in Hessel, your manor, my manor. How does it feel walking into Parliament for the first time?
For the very first time. I remember walking in and almost, I suppose, being this first time I've ever been in Parliament, I took a group of children in year 6, 10 and 11-year-olds to go and have a look round and visit the education centre. And I remember it was that feeling of like you're walking in a place of history, you're setting foot where other people have been. And if you go into Westminster Hall, I always take the children to the point. I'm like, get them to stand in this one particular point. And I said, that's where Charles I was sentenced to be beheaded. And it's kind of the enormity of like you're stood in a place that is so saturated with history and events. That's where the Queen lied. That's where the Queen Mother was. This is where Nelson Mandela, there's a plaque on the floor where he stood and addressed both houses of Parliament, the Lords and the Commons, and so that feels like a bit like, wow. I think Westminster Hall has that wow factor when you think about all the amazing things. Someone told me, I don't know if it's true or not, that Henry VIII used to play badminton or something. Someone's going to contact and say this is a load of rubbish, and that they found an old shuttlecock or something. This could be total rubbish. But I thought that was amazing, the idea that this was the place of Henry VIII and this is where I'm walking into work. So that, I think, that can be a bit like, I suppose, awe-inspiring, a bit like, wow, this is a place of history. But then when you look into the shabby a bit down the corner, it's a bit less, and the mousetraps, it's a bit less awe-inspiring. So yeah, so it's slightly daunting, but also kind of exciting and quite thrilling. And I'd say to everyone, go at least once, go book a visit. It's free, completely free to organise a visit. You can arrange for a talk. It's part of democracy. Anybody can go in and listen to debates. You don't have to book it, though. Obviously, P&Qs is generally always sold out. But you can go in, get a tour, have a look around, go and have a listen, because everyone has a right as a citizen of the UK to go and visit Parliament and see exactly what goes on.
Next time you're on Hull trains, plan your trip. I've given them a local business a plug. Henry is, I don't know whether Henry's a bloodhound, but lives in West Hull. What does Parliament smell like?
It's a great question.
It's a really good question.
Leather, old cigars and leathery old blokes. What does Parliament smell like?
I think honestly it depends which bit you're in. I mean, because if you're in the place called Portcullis House, where a lot of people when they come into Parliament often come in there, that bit's quite nice and quite open and quite airy, and so that's not too bad. But there's like one of the only places in Parliament that has air conditioning. I think probably the only place in Parliament that has air conditioning is actually the chamber, the debating chamber, because there isn't anywhere around the rest of it. And because it's really old, and obviously you can't always open the windows and things. It's hot. It can be really hot. And so that place is probably smells a bit better because it's got air conditioning. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, but it has got that. In some of the rooms, almost when you see, do you know what I mean? When the light comes in and the curtains are open and you can see the dust almost in the sunlight coming in through the window. It is a bit like that because it is really old, and they're constantly trying to repair and do bits to the main palace of Westminster. So there's often sort of like, it's a bit dusty, because there's building works going on.
Sawdust and stuff like that.
Well, because they're constantly sort of working on it because it's a big old palace and it's crumbling. So it's kind of got that almost, not like a building site, that's too strong, but sort of dust
like
in
a
the
workshop.
Okay.
Well, yeah, but it's.
We probably need. Can you? Will the budget stretch on the CuriosityCast to scratch and sniff? We'll move on. Oh, here's one. Should the bars in Parliament be subsidised? Says Amelia in South Holderness. They are, aren't they?
I was asking.
Are you
about
hitting the bar
this.
every night?
No,
no. I'm just asking.
No. I don't think you can go hitting the bar every night and getting up in the morning. So there's a few restaurants throughout Parliament, and they're all obviously they're all different because there's thousands of people work in Parliament. And so there's one which is called Strangers Bar, which was for MPs, peers, and their guests. But all the rest of them, I believe, are all for anyone who works within Parliament to go and use. So the main cafeterias, whether you're there as the security guard or whether you're there as clean, everyone goes in and tends to use the big cafeterias and things like that. So it's almost kind of like a works canteen is what they look like. But I think under Lindsay, and I'll have to double check this, he wanted to sort of look at changing some of this because they had a look into sort of the culture and how can we make Parliament more of a as a general better place for everybody to work in and for everybody to be in. And so he's looking at changing that. So there's lots more low alcohol or non-alcoholic beers on tap and things like that. But so I'd have to sort of double check, but he's introducing various reforms into sort of what goes on there.
But going back to Amelia's question, should they be subsidised? I think
I think food, is different because that's for everybody who works on the parliamentary estate. That's not just for members of parliament. So I think everyone who works on the parliamentary estate can access the cafeterias and the canteens and the
guests
coffee.
As well,
and
people
guests,
you bring in.
Yeah, and people you bring in and guests for coffee. And so I think, like any massive workplace, I think having like a works canteen which is subsidised, I don't think is unfair. I think the question is, should alcohol be subsidised? And I don't think alcohol should be subsidised. And I believe the Speaker's introducing reforms, but I'd have to go back and check exactly what reforms he's introducing and how that's working. But I think that's different to, if you're working there on security all day and you want to go and get your lunch, then I think that's a different case. And I think outside, most people think that the canteens are only accessed by members of parliament. They're not. They're accessed by anybody who wants to, anyone with a parliamentary pass.
So when myself and producer Dave get invited to the House of Commons for Dave to address the nation and the MPs on the great success of the CuriosityCast, what should we go for? You mentioned the salad bar earlier. Look at us. We're not going to the salad bar.
Yeah.
Is it shepherd's pie?
Well,
do they do baked beans?
So the one MP once told me when I started, he said, watch out for the Westminster Stone. And I said, what's the Westminster Stone? He said, everyone who's been in Parliament for about 6 months a year puts on a stone because of the type of food that you eat. So the salad bar is actually in DEFRA, which is a separate government building that's further away from Parliament. But in Parliament itself, in the main canteen, because there's the main canteen on the floor, and then upstairs there's a small, annex for members of Parliament. It's the same food. It's like your school dinner. I mean, I really like it, but this is where
green Moncton potatoes.
Well, this is where you get the Westminster Stone. It's like macaroni cheese, shepherd's pie. I think Wednesday they do kind of almost like a bit of a roast, but not a full on roast.
I'm running for an MP. I'm going for it.
But then it's a sponge and custard pudding nearly every day. It's really bad for you. Sponge and custard pudding, and so you can go in there and it's sort of like that kind of. I'm making it sound obviously it's good, but it's that kind of like.
Well, it is like a public school in there. It sounds like.
No wonder they're all asleep in an afternoon.
So you look and you think there's a small selection of salad which is really just lettuce, tomato, and cucumber, and then
devil's work.
But then you look and it's like fish and chips, it is more your school dinner. So it is. I'd say the Westminster Stone is a real thing.
You've done well. You've done well on it. George in HU8 wanted to know: is the food in Parliament any good? George is on Holderness Road. We've sort of answered that. Flossie, who's on Beverley Road in Newland. Here's a political one. How does it serve democracy to have hereditary peers in the House of Lords?
Oh.
Well, that's good. That's no messing about there. Emma Harley's on the spot on the CuriosityCast.
Well, I don't think it does serve democracy to have hereditary peers. I think people who are nominated as peers should do so because of their skills, their knowledge, their specialism, their talent in whichever area serves our country. And that's not to say that some hereditary peers aren't very capable. I'm absolutely sure some of them are. But I think it's that question of fairness. Is it fair that somebody gets to become a member of the House of Lords because they were born one? No. Is my response to that. If they get to become a member of the House of Lords because of their own merit, because of their talent, their knowledge. I mean, in the House of Lords, there's some real experts in a whole variety of fields, and they bring something, I think, to democracy in terms of scrutiny. Because, of course, there's crossbenchers in the House of Lords. So the House of Lords is different and operates different and has a different feel to the House of Commons. So in the House of Commons, obviously, you've got Labour, Conservative, Green, Lib Dem, Plaid Cymru, and all the political parties. In the House of Lords, you have all your crossbenchers, which are people who've been nominated to be members of the House of Lords who don't have political affiliation. And they are called crossbenchers and literally sit in the middle of the House of Lords, down the middle. And they're there on merit. And so that they can look at an argument put forward by a Labour government or Conservative government or this, that and the other and judge it without that political affiliation of being, well, I've got to vote that because I'm Conservative or I've got to vote that because I'm Labour.
Oh, I'm all for more of that.
Yeah.
I'm all for more of that. So
they're called, so they're called crossbenchers and they can be nominated by any Prime Minister. And it's generally because they're some judges or, they've got a lot of knowledge in a particular area. Now, which I think is a really positive thing. Now, some hereditary peers sit as crossbenchers, but my argument is that if they have the talents and the ability to be there as members of the House of Lords, then they should therefore be just made members of the House of Lords rather than be there because they were born into it.
That answers the question from Flossie, which was a great question to the Curiosity
So would
Cast.
you vote to get rid of them if there was a vote on it?
Yeah.
Great.
That's much more incisive than my next question. It was very good. I just was going to ask, do you fancy being Lady Hardy of Hessel? Is that on the list?
Well, you can, as it stands, you can only become.
I didn't get a yes or a no.
No. But I think but I just have to say, some hereditary peers do a really, really good job, and there is nothing wrong with them becoming life peers, is what it's called. So you're a life peer because you're there for as long as you're alive. That sounds grim, but you're a life peer, which is different to being a hereditary peer. So I think that some hereditary peers do a fantastic job. I've got nothing against them being made life peers. It's the hereditary bit that I object to.
And what about, because there has been some talk about having an age limit for Lords as well,
they would. I don't know where they've got with that.
Was it 80 or 85?
Ageist.
I mean, there's...
Is it though?
Wow.
My dad's 83 and I wouldn't want him making laws. I don't even like him making the tea,
I think there's lots of people enter the House of Lords when they're older because they've had lots of times a long career, as I say, developing the specialist knowledge. But so, there's pros and cons on that. I'm less sort of set in my view on whether there should be an age limit. But I think as long as people have something to contribute to our democracy, then that sounds like a good thing.
Maybe it should be a physical instead. Make them do half a marathon if they survive the carry.
We'd struggle then.
This is like the Hunger Games now, isn't it?
We'd struggle. You're off on one there. This is the Curiosity Cast. Our special guest is Emma Hardy MP, the current MP for Hull West and Haltemprice. This is good from Alex in the West Hull Villages in HU13. How many times a day do you have to bite your tongue in the name of diplomacy?
I think it would be better to say, when do I not have to bite my tongue in the name of diplomacy?
It's amazing you can taste the food. You've got a little tongue left.
Yeah, in between the macaroni and cheese mouthfuls. Yeah, I think you do. I think there's I don't know. People have different views, and I've generally tried to be a politician that builds more consensus rather than tries to divide. So I try and find the source of where I kind of agree with someone. So if someone gives me a long list of things, I'll try and think, well, okay, on that bit, I can see your point and I can see some agreement, even if I can't agree on that way. Because I don't think democracy needs hotheads, and I think therefore it is best.
Where did that all go wrong then?
And we all have our moments now. We all have our moments, but you do learn from your mistakes, and I think sometimes I'm getting much better at when you see an email coming in and you think, right, and you go to reply and then thinking, actually, just sleep on it, have a look in the morning, and then think about replying to it. And I think so. I think it's something you have to learn.
It's interesting because it leads on to the next question, and I'm sort of wondering, do not enough people in politics count to 10 and just step back from something or other, or there are merchants in there who want to inflame the situation, etc., etc. And one of the ways they do it is social media. Claire in South Cave in HU15 says, what can be done about lies on social media? Shouldn't political ads on social media be subject to the same rules as those of TV and press ads?
Yeah, so I know in terms of this year's general election, so all of the ads that were put out by politicians, all the different political ads, had to carry the same disclaimer that you then get in printed literature, where it says printed and produced by so-and-so on behalf of so-and-so. So people would know if something came up and it was an advert from myself and it was promoting, I don't know, Great British Energy or something like that, you could look and go, okay, well, Emma's promoting that. So at least then talking about that critical literacy, you can then think either, oh, well, I'll dismiss it because it's come from a politician, but at least it gives you a sense of where's this information come from. And I think that's a good step in the right direction. So where's the source of the information? So anything that's a political advert, the Electoral Commission changed the rules so that they all had to be badged with, right, who's sending you this political advert? Who's paying for it? Who has it come from? And therefore, you can look at it and go, right, well, that's come from so-and-so. And so I think that's a good step in the right direction.
It had a massive effect in the Brexit campaign, didn't it? All these supposed last minute, these ads suddenly appeared online saying the EU were going to ban polar bears and ban tea bags. And nobody was claiming them, but they all came from the kind of leave source, but there was no comeback because it wasn't the official vote leave people that were doing it, and yet it still lies that people will believe, won't it?
You've got to be, you can obviously, politicians can put out political adverts that say different things, and I'd claim some of the things they said weren't true, and I'm sure they'll claim some of the things I said weren't. But I think it's about identifying that you see an advert pop up on your Facebook, right, who is it from and who's paying for it? And I think that helps to make a difference. The same way when you get like a leaflet through from a politician, there's in small writing, there's something called the imprint that will say who it paid for and promoted by, who's paid for it, and who's it done for. Because I think that will help people to make up their own minds about the information. Because if you know someone's trying to persuade you, quite obviously, in the election, I'm trying to persuade people to vote for the Labour Party. That's not a secret. But at least when you're viewing something, okay, well, that person is putting that there because they want me to vote for them. It helps with that honesty. But I think some of the problems on social media, and we've seen that more and more, is that I think people understanding, and this is where the legal challenges come in recently, if you publish on social media, you're a publisher. You're not just voicing your opinion, you're publishing your opinion. Therefore, it's the same as if you put it in a newspaper, in terms of you can be held accountable for that. And I think this is where some people have made various comments on social media and maybe not recognise that is the same as them publishing their information somewhere else.
This is a supplementary question from me. Don't answer it because I don't know what our legal provision is like. But are there people, when they get up on their feet in the House of Commons, that you think this is just going to be a load of old bull? And I'm looking at your face there. This is somebody's going to have the old Pinocchio nose here.
Well,
don't name names.
I will not.
The CuriosityCast.
And you're not allowed to call anybody a liar.
No, you're not.
You can't do that.
And
that doesn't mean you can't think it.
No, absolutely.
Well, I think it's you. So House of Commons obviously have parliamentary privilege, which is there to protect what you say. So if you stand up in the chamber and say something, you have parliamentary privilege and being able to say more things than you can outside. So you can't be held liable. So some MPs have used this if they wanted to out someone involved in a certain scandal, or so it can be used as a powerful weapon of challenging people.
Because then the media can get it.
Exactly. And you can't be held liable for it. But it's not something that you would use without seriously considering whether you should say it or not. Not because you're worried about personal liability, but because you're putting information out there. There are some people, you try.
Don't name names.
No, I won't. And you can think, I'll just say that when, in the first Parliament, 2017, 2019, I was obviously Keir Starmer's Prime Minister's PPS. And so I was in every single Brexit debate, sat behind him with various papers and bits and pieces in my lap. So I sat in every single Brexit debate that there was. And I tell you now, the same people gave the same speech in every single debate and still spoke in every single debate that there was and still gave the same speech. And they'd stand up and I'd think, I know exactly what they're going to say. And they never seemed to, I think it was quite frustrating, ever listen to or respond to. It was just, I'm going to stand up and say the same thing I've said for the last however many times. We're going to have 20 minutes of the speech I've heard 10 times before. But that's democracy. People, they're elected and they have a right to give that opinion.
Sharon in Cottingham, do you fancy being Prime Minister?
No.
Right.
Oh.
There's a yes or no question. No, and I tell you...
Well, that's what Mrs. Thatcher said before she became Prime Minister.
No, it's really because I think being Prime Minister, you can't be part in, you've got to be all in. And it's got to be your life. And I've got family, I've got a partner, I've got a life here, and I don't want to give all of that up.
Okay. A very reasonable human answer. Yeah.
I bet she's Prime Minister in 6 months.
This from Jack in Brough in HU15. Emma Hardy, if you weren't a politician, what would you be?
Well, as you know, I was a teacher. So I was a teacher for 11 years, primary school teacher, which I did really love. But I'd actually stopped doing that. And I was working for the NUT and I was working with supporting teachers. And I was looking at developing and supporting young teachers, early career teachers, should I say, rather than young teachers, early career teachers. And, as they were sort of getting on. So I was always really interested in sort of policy, in education policy. So I imagine I'd probably be doing something in that space. I think I'd always want to be involved in trying to change things somehow, either from working directly with people as a teacher or working in policy through the union, or, how can we make things better? Because all around we see so many things are broken everywhere, constantly. And I think I've always been someone that's like, right, okay, so what we're going to do about it.
Donald, who I suspect is, because we get quite a lot of children on sending in questions on the CuriosityCast. Donald, I suspect, because I had an uncle Donald, is probably more mature, judging by the question that's come in. And blimey, it'll take me a minute to read it, so you've got a minute to answer it. Here, is the daily process of Parliament now so calcified by procedure and tradition that only a complete overhaul of the bureaucratic system, including moving government away from the palaces of Westminster, the only way to meaningfully reinvigorate the democratic process in the UK? I couldn't even read it. It was that long a question.
It's a corking question, though, when you break it down.
Have you got a minute's view on that, Emma Hardy MP?
Okay, I think some of the old traditions in the way that we do things, I quite like. I mean, some of them are quite quaint, some of them are quite interesting, but it goes back to that, this is a place of history and this is a place that has evolved, over the years and to do things. So when you present a new bill and you have to walk to the end, take 3 steps, bow, take 3 steps, bow, take 3 more steps, bow again.
It's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. So there are strange customs and strange practices, but I kind of think that's sort of like harmless and it's our history and we've been doing it for years. But I think the key, what I picked up from Donald's question is, should we always employ everybody in and around London? The answer to that, I think, is no. See, I don't mind working from home argument. We've talked about this before, because I think actually if you allow people flexible working, it means they can potentially live in Hull and work as a civil servant and travel down for 2 days a week and spend the rest of the week in Hull. And we're starting to see this a bit more because they're not having to be in the office every single day. And I think that's a good thing, because I think if you're drawing talent from all around the country, offering them employment in London, potentially part of the week, and then the rest of the week they can be working from home, still doing the same job. And one of the things I've noticed in the DEFRA team where I am, there's a big DEFRA office in York. There's a big one in Bristol. I've been up to the one in Newcastle because obviously environmental issues you need to be out where they are. And I think that's brilliant. So there are loads of people working for government in York, in Newcastle, in Hull, and travelling to York. So I think that's a really positive thing. So how can we bring more of the opportunity that jobs in government provide to people in our area? Great thing. But I quite like the bowing. And
the bowing and the scraping. And on that note, that will bring to an end this episode of the CuriosityCast. Our thanks to Emma Hardy MP for being our guest on this episode. Remember, you can ask questions and seek answers on the Curiosity website, www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or follow and befriend us on socials. We're Curiosity Hull on all the main feeds. We'll be back very soon with more quality answers to whatever question you like to ask. Just one final one. When Dave and I come down to be ennobled or to address the Houses of Commons, can we have some jam roly-poly and the fish and chips, please? No salad. Emma Hardy, thank you for your time.
Thank you.